TCM.com/tours.
We talk about the code, quote unquote, and films being pre-code. Of course, we're talking about the
Hollywood Production Code.
The Hays Code.
Yes, indeed.
Authored in 1930 by William Hays.
Well, it was kind of put together in 1930 to have rules by which Hollywood producers had to follow. What you could and couldn't say in a movie. It was time for some kind of governing, and they were afraid the government was going to come in and do that. So to try to counterbalance that, they had this production code put together.
Right. The Hays Code talked about infidelity, it talked about sexuality, it talked about nudity, but the thing where the authority of the Hays Code kind of makes sense was when it had to do with crime and with criminals.
Problem was, nobody followed it for a long time. It had no teeth to it, and nobody was there strong enough.
Until when?
1934.
34.
But what we're concentrating on, of course, are those movies that were made before they put the teeth in the code. Penthouse, 1933, Myrna Loy, Warner Baxter, from MGM, actually, which was an unusual studio for a lot of gangster films. They didn't often do them.
Right. Now, Warner Baxter, to me, is an unusual actor because you read his bio, and he was in some pretty unusual films. I mean, films like Such Men Are Dangerous. A few years later, he made Such Women Are Dangerous in his filmography, which I find very unusual.
Such Babies Are Dangerous.
Right, Such Aliens Are Dangerous.
42nd Street.
42nd Street.
That's a famous line about you got to go out there nobody knows you, but you got to come back a star, you know.
Had a nervous breakdown in his personal life and didn't work for quite a while. Very complicated life. But Baxter is a kind of actor who he reminds me of an American version to some degree. I mean, in a lot of ways, this is not an apt comparison, but he reminds me of like James Mason, somebody who just had a rat-tat-tat facility with dialogue.
You know, what's amazing is he had such a beautiful voice, and as you said, handled dialogue so well, and yet he actually became a star in silent movies. He was a silent screen star, and remained one then when the sound came along. He made one of the earliest sound films, which is In Old Arizona, won the Academy Award for playing the Cisco Kid in it, did a couple sequels to that, was in, you know, a whole line of Fox films. He was a big star at Fox, but he was a big star for a long time.
Van Dyke, W.S. Van Dyke,
was
who directed this, to the Thin Man series.
Thin Man series.
With Myrna.
With Myrna Loy.
Was he introduced to Myrna here on this film?
Well, I think he'd been around MGM and had her a lot, but he saw something in Myrna Loy nobody else saw. They all saw her as a rather exotic, complicated femme fatale, and he saw her as she really was, a girl from Montana. So he really held out for her for the Thin Man. They didn't think she was right for that at all, because she'd always played exotic ladies before. And of course, that made her whole career, and that made that whole series. She was so wonderful in it with William Powell. But he had directed her, I think the first time he directed her, I believe, was in a movie called Manhattan Melodrama with William Powell and Clark Gable. And out of that came The Thin Man and everything else.
Well, like we've talked about actors in the early part of their career finding their way toward who they're going to become. Betty Davis in a film we're going to see later on, Cooper and Frederick March. Myrna Loy, what she became in terms of this kind of effortless and kind of, the apex of kind of sophistication on film, as she would later, with William Powell, do the Thin Man series. And there's a kind of a byplay, there's a kind of a battery between the Nick and Nora Charles character that almost defined what tandem acting could be between a man and a woman.
She's a wonderful actress. So let's see the movie. Here from MGM in 1933, with the screenplay by the celebrated team of Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich, we bring you Penthouse.